yesterday for like the first time in 6 months, and I can't move today. I'm like a robot. My arms are killing me.
Oh yes. I'm
This is
so
your
glad
fault,
you went.
Anika. I keep seeing you every morning at the gym. I'm like, oh bloody hell, I gotta do this, haven't I now?
I told you I was losing my mind. I was saying this to Lee like last week when I first started. This is my third week, and I've been 4 days, Tuesday to Friday. And when I get to Friday, I'm like, oh my God, yes, I've finished. I'm ready for the weekend. But it actually has killed me. And I'm so glad that I've done it, because now I can't go back. And I put it on social media for the pressure. And I told you, Chloe, for the pressure. So when you're like, you didn't go to the gym today, I'm like, no, I didn't. Yeah, I have to be accountable.
I see you.
I have to be accountable.
Daz, we're live on the site now, so I can see the countdown.
Yeah.
I'm a touch nervous that we don't have Yaz. I think I'll just give her a little call.
Yeah.
We might want to broadcast slightly after midday if we don't get Yaz shortly. Can you see as the host any of the participants that are trying to get in?
Yeah, it pops up. Or there's the people that have popped up since have admitted, and there's nobody else waiting.
All right. Let me give.
Oh wait there.
Can't imagine she's got stage fright.
No.
I'll call her, Anika. Hopefully she's all right.
Yeah.
Where's our moderator?
If anyone is going out today, though, it is actually, the sun's really out. So whilst you're in the sun, you're feeling a warm vibe. But apart from that,
He does look a bit miserable out there.
Yeah, it's awful.
Daz, let's change that broadcast time to 12:10.
Okay.
So the plan is when Yaz starts the panel, we're going to broadcast it live on the Silence website. Then I'm going to send out a newsletter saying, that it's live and you can come and watch it on the website. But of course, we can't start without our moderator.
Indeed.
Okay, so we're all set up with the live stream. So that's the code in place and everything in place now. So when that countdown finishes, we'll be live. Just for the people that are already in, there's a slight lag. So I'll give you a countdown. And I'll let you know about 30 seconds before that time before we go live. And if you could all mute your microphones, and then whoever's going to do the starting intro, who I guess is going to be the moderator. Is that going to be Yaz?
Yeah, that'll be Yaz, yeah.
So she'll need to then cough. I'll let her know this. Cough at the 30-second point, so that she's in focus in the Zoom meeting, so that when the broadcast starts, she's in focus and not somebody else. That's why I'm asking you to mute your microphones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as I finish the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown, you can then all just unmute your microphones.
Cool.
I'll try and remember
that. Wow.
Right, here we go. We've got some more guests now. Admit.
I think Yaz might be there.
Well, it's a different Yaz, actually. Hey, Ebony. Hey, Yaz.
Hi.
So we're just waiting for our moderator. And you can imagine if she's got the wrong time in her diary. She can't.
That's what I was just thinking. I literally just messaged her like, oh, hey.
She thinks it's next Friday.
Imagine. No, she can't. She can't.
She's so on it. And she's got a wonderful collection of questions for you. Well, I don't know. Let's just talk amongst ourselves and see. Give her a bit more time.
She would be really British and talk about the weather. Yeah, there's other stuff. I've got a topic. What's everybody watching on Netflix? One show, one recommendation.
It's not on Netflix. Ooh.
Oh, hey,
Hi, sorry. Sorry, Billy. Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
How you doing?
Yeah, good. So look, yes, we've well, Daz, should we do it at? Should we say 12:05?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yaz, we're going to start at 12:05.
Okay.
We're going to broadcast this on the Silence website. I'm going to, once we're live on the Silence website, send out a newsletter inviting people to come and watch us there. Daz has got control of the Zoom, so he's letting people in as they arrive. So, we've got Antonia and another Yaz, and Ebony, and I think we'll have other guests joining us who then can ask any questions that they might have once you feel that's appropriate. And that's it from me. So what Darren will do as we approach 12:05, he'll just count you down, and maybe Daz, you could explain to Yaz what she needs to do so that when we launch live on the website, Yaz, you're in focus.
So, let me start by handing the stream over to make you the host, Yaz, so that you can control people's microphones and admit people and do anything else that you need to do. Somebody else.
Actually, it might be better if you keep it, Daz, because if people start turning up, it'll be a distraction for Yaz. That maybe you could keep it and let them in.
Can I be co-host and?
Yeah, maybe you can do that. Actually, maybe you can have two hosts. I don't know. Unless you're happy letting people in, Yaz, as you're chatting. You're pretty familiar with this stuff.
I am, but I'd prefer not to, if that's possible. If not, that's fine. I will make it work. But if it's possible, for someone else to focus on that, then I can keep an eye on things like questions in the chat and stuff as well, and like what's being said as well.
Daz, do you want to stay as the moderator, Daz?
So yeah, I'll stay. It's fine. So basically, from 30 seconds to the live time, I want you to be in focus. So you'll need to make a noise or cough or something. I'm going to mute everyone else's microphones so that you will be in focus, Yaz. And then from 5 seconds to live, we'll give you a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then you can just start your spiel and your intro. And then when it goes live on the site, because there's a lag in the stream, people might see the stream from anywhere up to 30 seconds before. So for that 30 seconds, you probably just want to actually look at the camera and look into the lens in case people are just like, oh, there's Yaz and she's not saying anything. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that's all good.
And then as soon as you start your spiel, I'll probably let you finish your spiel before I start just unmuting people's microphones. Or if everyone, actually, I'll leave that to you. To unmute your own microphones when you want to ask a question. That's probably the best thing.
Yeah.
We've got a load more
I
guests.
mean, the three panelists, of course, just have your microphones on. It's really the attendees who are going to ask questions at the end that need to mute. Best of luck.
I've got noisy flatmates, so I'm going to keep mine muted until I'm asked a question.
And then, just at the end, when you finish, once you do your outro, then I'll stop the live stream the second you finish your last word and say goodbye, farewell. Everyone else, if you just stay in the Zoom, but again, obviously keep your microphones muted while she's doing her outro, and then the same thing applies because of the lag. If you can just continue, after you've done your outro, continue to look into the lens and smile for about 30 seconds. And I'll let you know when that 30 seconds is up. And then obviously everyone can unmute and we're not on air anymore and you can just crack on as per usual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 2 minutes.
All right.
I'm just going to need a reminder just closer to the time. That was a lot of instructions for me.
Right, I'm gonna mute, which is unusual for me. Good luck.
Yeah. So 2 minutes to go. So you can carry on talking amongst yourselves now. You don't need to be quiet now.
I don't know whether I should be muted, unmuted. I'm so confused now, Darren.
Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. It doesn't really matter. How exciting. There's more guests joining.
Oh.
Got a few now. Okay, minute to go, Yaz. So yeah, you make sure you stay in focus. I'll mute now.
Am I on mute? No. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, this not so lovely Friday afternoon, which is a bit of a shame because it's been such lovely weather. But instead, I'm glad that you're joining us today for this talk on diversity and inclusion in advertising. This event has been brought to us by Silence Media, who are a creative and data-driven programmatic media partner that understands behavioral designs, believes in inclusive planning, and delivers neutral media buying. Silence are members of the Conscious Advertising Network, which are a coalition of over 70 organizations who are really pushing for more ethical and equitable practice in advertising. And as part of this, they are committed to producing advertising campaigns that are as diverse and representative as the country that we live in. They believe that all brands and organizations should recognize diversity and inclusion in their advertising, and not only as a moral imperative, but as a business necessity as well. I'm your host today. I'll be moderating the conversation. My name is Yassine Senghor. Yaz is also fine. Pronouns she and her. And I'm from Confronting Change, Diversity and Inclusion Strategies. We are a diversity and inclusion consultancy. I work with a range of organizations to build and develop their inclusive and equitable work practices to ensure that they're building genuinely inclusive workplaces that take into consideration the needs of all their employees. But beyond looking just internally, I also encourage them to look outwards and to really consider how their work impacts the community and the wider societies that we exist in, and constantly pushing for increased visibility, representation, and inclusion. Just a few bits of housekeeping before I introduce our guests. Please stay on mute while we are having what was going to be a really exciting conversation. If you do have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat. We'll try and get to them if they're relevant to a specific area of what we're talking about, but we'll also have time right at the end for more chats and more questions and conversation from you. So don't worry, like if something comes up or I haven't got to a question, we'll get to it at the end and we'll have a nice little chunk of time at the end to discuss things further. But yeah, feel free to say hi to each other in the chat, to introduce yourselves, where you're from, what's brought you here today, and just get to know each other a little bit more while we're having this amazing conversation today. I'm joined by three incredible panelists who we're so grateful for giving up their time and their expertise and their knowledge. Annika Williams from Spark Foundry, Tom Nolan-Jackson from De Winters, and machine learning engineer Chloe Sievewright. We're incredibly grateful for them for giving up like this solid block of time to really delve into how to build diversity and inclusion into advertising. So without further ado, I'd like to say hi to Annika, Tom, and Chloe. Give a little wave or something. Say hi. Cool. And then let's dive into our first question, which is just about getting to know you a bit more and allowing you to introduce yourselves a bit more. So what do you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, if you'd like, and your role specifically. Let's start with Annika.
So hi guys, my name's Anika. I am a media consultant for Silence Media. My day job is working as a digital investment manager for Spark Foundry. I've been in the advertising industry for about 6 years plus. I've worked for a range of big media agencies to really small independent ones. So I've had a varied experience across the board, from offline media to now digital media and everything in between that one. So yeah, spent a lot of time in advertising and marketing, and just really here to share my knowledge, experiences and things that I've come across whilst working in the industry, and how I'm here to confront the change for diversity and inclusion moving forward. I've been working with Lee and Yaz for the past few months on this diversity and inclusion workshop. And just really excited to be a part of the panel here today and just have a conversation about diversity and inclusion and what it means to not only me, but to all you guys here, and just to really get down to the finer detail of what it actually means, and not just a sort of an overcast and just a word or a phrase that's thrown around, and just see how we all really feel about it and open that line of conversation with not only ourselves and within our internal companies, but with the clients that we're working with and the people that we interact with every day. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing, thank you. And sorry for butchering your name there. Tom?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Nolan-Jackson. I work for an independent media agency called De Winters. We specialise in West End products, so theatrical shows, musicals, plays, and so on. It's been quite a challenging year for that industry. So I'm kind of quite recently back to work. I've been, I guess, within media now for approaching 5 years, which does make me feel quite old. But I'm not. I'm the right side of 30. And I guess kind of everything that Nika's really said there, I absolutely echo that. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation and talking more and more about it, and also giving a bit of insight into what we're doing as an agency currently to help make the right changes happen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. I think actually you're probably the perfect example of exactly what we need in the industry at the minute, where you've got this breadth of experience and over some time, but you're still quite young and quite knowledgeable about like some of the changes happening in the world and some of the changes that we need to be pushing for as well. Chloe?
Hello, so nice to meet everyone. I'm a machine machine learning engineer and researcher, born and bred in South Wales, but now living in London. And I work primarily on speech and voice technologies. I've been working in industry for about 4 years now at a big tech company. And that in that time, I've worked on like a bunch of different aspects of speech technologies, but primarily like text to speech systems and QA systems for search. So that's kind of like my day job, but I'm really passionate about trying to decentralize access to computer science education. And so like, what do I mean by that is that I believe that people should have the opportunity to access the resources they need to pursue careers in computer science. And I'm kind of motivated by the idea that it's really strange to people to hear that, you know, this lady from South Wales now works in kind of, I've worked in California in like all of these really, you know, popular and well-known places, but it's kind of strange to them, like, oh, how did you get into this industry, being from kind of a place in the world that I think some people think is remote, which is kind of not true. But I think like opening up this access is something that I'm really trying to do for young aspiring computer scientists. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you. And that really raises such an important point that we definitely want to cover in this conversation around creating access to these roles and opportunities and jobs that people aren't even aware of exist, let alone how they are going to find a route into them. And if you come from, you know, certain backgrounds, never seeing anybody who looks like you in those positions. So never really necessarily feeling that you have you can find a place in those spaces. So thanks for raising that, and we'll definitely cover that as we go on in the conversation. But I want to start the conversation by just talking about like diversity and inclusion more broadly and what that means to you specifically. To me, in all the work that I do, this is one of my greatest passions. And it's something in a lot of ways that I feel like I don't even necessarily have a choice in doing. Like, I believe in a fair world, in an equitable world where we recognize, you know, the differences and the advantages and disadvantages that some people are born with, and that we all have responsibility in making the shifts and changes to create some equality. So I want to put this out to the group. What does diversity and inclusion mean to you? I'm going to start again with Anika. Sorry, only 4 months we've been working together.
It's one of those ones. It's once you hear it once, it just carries on, doesn't it? So diversity and inclusion to me, for me, as you mentioned, Jazz, it is a moral imperative. It's something that it became more of an issue that I wanted to get a grasp of as I furthered into my career. Like, just starting out in the industry, I was just so eager to learn, and it didn't really occur to me that certain factors of companies not being diverse and inclusive can limit me of trying to progress, or didn't have access to certain areas of learning or things like that, just giving me this sort of glass ceiling which I couldn't further my experience and once again progress. And as I've grown and as I've worked how to navigate through it, I've just realized, why is it so hard? And there must be something, that a wider conversation that we're all missing, that someone just says, well, why is it so hard for a Black woman like me to take so long to progress in the media industry? Why am I not given certain opportunities, and why are things not presented to me in certain ways just because I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman, I'm a certain age? All these factors all work into why the diversity and inclusion the lack of diversity and inclusion that I've experienced in these companies, why that's been an issue for me. And now I think is a great time to really open this line of conversation and really start talking about it. And just because it's on the tip of everybody's tongue, it's the right time to strike. It's the right time to really extend these conversations. It's unfortunate that it's taken so long, but the fact that we're here now talking about it really does give me hope that we can change things for the future. And we've done so much so far, and making so many different communities inclusive and things like that. But it's time for us to really individually stand up and say, well, that doesn't sit right with me. That doesn't include me. That statement right there I don't agree with that, and being comfortable with saying that. So for me, it's opening the line of conversation and really tackling it now. And even though the conversation's late, it's still needed.
Amazing. Yeah, I fully agree. That point is towards the end around it's great that these conversations are finally happening, but actually there's this real sense, I think, of I personally feel it, where we have to step up a little bit and say, actually, I deserve better than this. And no, I'm not going to accept this anymore, and demand change as well, and believe that we do have power to demand that change.
Yeah. That's it.
Tom, what are your thoughts? Why is D&I important to you? Or what does it mean to you?
Well, firstly, I'm going to apologise to Nika for saying that I was the right side of 30. There is no right or wrong side of 30, or any age for that matter. I'm just a bit frightened because I am turning 30 in December. So that's just my own problem that I'm broadcasting. Apologies. So to me, it's so important because I think the one thing we all have in common as human beings is the lived experience. And everybody's lived experience is completely different to another. Of course, that goes without saying. But I guess we could call it systematic. There are a lot of injustices, the way that people are viewed, treated, the advantages certain people are given and disadvantages that then are almost forced upon other people. To me, it's about eradicating those things. And it's not an overnight process. We're all aware of that. But I think, echoing what Nika said, now is the time to make it happen. If not now, then when? We could talk about doing it in 5 years' time. But my question is kind of, why aren't we making these changes happen now? And we are to a degree. And so the more of these conversations that we can have, the more we can learn from each other, the closer we're getting, as slowly or quickly as it happens to, my idealistic version of the world, which is that those things don't really exist for future generations, I'd say. If that answers your question, Yaz.
Yeah, it does perfectly. I think there's some really amazing points there around taking action, and going beyond just the kind of like setting the theory down and having people talk about it, even though the talking is important. And the point that you said there as well about us, sharing our experiences, sharing our concerns, the barriers that we faced, and having the conversations in a way of not being afraid to share when we get things wrong, things we're uncomfortable about, things we don't have a lot of knowledge about, and really genuinely listening and learning from each other as well. So yeah, that definitely answered my question. So Chloe, why is diversity and inclusion important to you, or what does it mean to you?
So I wanted to be a bit transparent here. I actually struggle a lot with the term like diversity and inclusion, because when I think about it, I think it means so many different things in kind of different contexts. So if I was talking specifically about perhaps like my work, I often think diversity and inclusion means diversity of thought. So I've spent like a lot of time working in academia and now working in like a tech company. And, it's very common that like recruitment practices, for instance, will be from particular red brick universities or like these Russell Group universities. And there's almost like an inequality, this bias almost for people who perhaps who have been self-taught or who have gone to like a lesser known university and these kind of things. And I think that that's like a real problem. Like a real diversity and inclusion problem for my work specifically. But I think overall, if I try to like generalize what diversity and inclusion means to me, I just think it's moving towards like a space where structures that serve our communities are more representative of the communities. And I think that trying to, influence and push and move towards this space, like be proactive in like making these environments uphold some, in my opinion, like fundamental human rights, which is like equality, privacy, equity and accessibility. Like this is something that as an individual, I feel as though it's my responsibility to constantly put pressure on the spaces that I occupy to do better in this sense. And I think that to move towards like a more diverse and inclusive kind of society, they're the kind of directions we need to work in. But I also love to consider what it means in context of like a specific domain or like a specific area.
Amazing. I really love that you framed it in terms of it being a human rights issue, and that I think more companies, organizations, and businesses need to start thinking about it in that way. And yeah, it's all well and good to talk about the business case for it, but at the end of the day, we're talking about people, and we're talking about the rights that we should all have in order to live, even just to exist, like the bare minimum, the rights that we should all have. So it's like taking it away from this idea that we're actually pushing for something super radical, and actually we just want a bare minimum where everybody is recognized and treated fairly and has equal access to, the bare minimum. Brilliant. So my next question is just giving you a chance to talk about some of your work and the work that you might be doing within your companies, or actually your own personal work as well. Are there any specific D&I related initiatives that you're currently involved in, or that you've recently worked on that you're really proud of? And let's start with Tom this time.
Happy to. So at De Winters, we have an initiative in place. It's an open dialogue at all times, really, between a group of volunteers from across the business and with our leadership team. So as part of that, it's allowed us, we're not I wouldn't say we're a particularly diverse agency currently, and we're all aware of that. And so it's the conversations are quite interesting, because there's almost well, how would we know about representing certain voices if those voices aren't represented within the agency? But I think there's a hell of a lot of allyship across our agency, which really aids those conversations. The theatrical world is another that is perhaps not as representative as it could be. There certainly are productions out there, and productions that we work on that are perhaps a little bit more inclusive. But as part of our agency mission, it's about finding ways to diversify the audiences, not only that we're reaching with our advertising campaigns, but how that changes almost the makeup of an audience when our shows, they're currently not open, but as soon as they do reopen, how can we make a difference there? How can we make theatre feel perhaps less exclusive and more accessible? So I'd say that that's kind of our mission, as well as many other things, recruitment, the partners that we're working with. We work very closely with Silence, and that's a brilliant relationship. And it's great to see all the work that Silence is doing in the digital space in terms of diverse marketplace, etc. That's not necessarily something that's happening across the industry. So it's about us almost taking a bit of a stand as well. And we've had over the last week a live example with one of our clients, where internal communication perhaps got a little bit fraught about things and wasn't necessarily that forward thinking. There's a lot of context to it, and producers and those kinds of different conversations were absolutely happening. But we as an agency, it's given us a great moment and opportunity to actually go, hang on, that doesn't reflect our values. And so by having this group and this initiative in place of, as I say, volunteers and our leadership group, and having those conversations as often as we can, it means that anything that's perhaps systemic and already maybe exists within the agency and within the industry, we can have those conversations and go, wait, this isn't, I'm uncomfortable about this. I'm sure everybody else would probably be a bit uncomfortable about this. So how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? So it's a lot of moving parts. And as I kind of said at the beginning, it's, our client base has been really, really, really heavily hit, of course, by COVID and the closure of theatres for the last year. So we're perhaps a little bit further behind where we might want to be at this point in time, but all progress, I do think, it's still progress and is still valid. So hopefully that gives loads of context and I haven't just rambled on about rubbish.
No, absolutely. There's so many good points that were coming out there that I wanted to touch upon. And firstly being that, like, no matter how big or small the movement, like, it is so important that we just keep moving forward, that we just keep progressing. And I hope that, like, if this COVID period and lockdowns and working from home has taught us anything, it is that, like, any kind of productivity and progress is important. Let's just take it and not beat ourselves too much about that. But actually, I really like the points that you were making around that engagement from your senior leadership team, where they are getting involved and they recognize that it's quite important that they're involved and leading this conversation and driving things forward, but also really listening to staff and listening to your experiences and recognizing that where that representation doesn't exist, starting to question why not, what can we do when that isn't in place. As you were saying about, like, reviewing your recruitment processes and how you're engaging audiences and what audiences you're not engaging, them taking that moment for this reflection process, this reflection period, so that when, things do start opening up again, you can really reconsider how you've been approaching things previously and start to change that. So yeah, it's brilliant and covers things quite well. Chloe, is there anything particularly that you're working on or involved with that you want to tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working a lot over the last year. I think it has provided, like, I don't know, the space for people to actually kind of listen and be responsive to different ideas that could help improve diversity and inclusion. So I'm part of the leadership team for a diversity network at work. And, when I think about over the last year, there's been so many initiatives. There's things like leadership training and recruitment pilots. I worked with a team of people on, an education about slavery and its impact on modern British culture, because I think that's kind of one of the nuances about being Black British, is that when you have a conversation about, racism and the impacts of slavery, British people, well, not all people obviously, but you do tend to default to this kind of American-centric version of what you understand slavery to be. And I think there's, like, a lack of education in the UK, mainly because of the history curriculums that we've been taught in schools and, like, just in general, that we don't quite kind of piece together how it impacts, our societies currently. And so there's, like, a bunch of organizations. The Black curriculum is one that I know has got, like, a lot of kind of publicity almost, and it's something that I've connected with the team there on how can we make that better, how can we kind of almost reform our education syllabuses to be more representative of, like, of the societies that are impacted and now living in Britain. Like, it's not okay to just eradicate or, like, brush over this whole history which impacts, like, communities of people so much. And then there's, like, other things. So in my work, for one of the things that I feel, like, really positive about is that I've had opportunities to push ideas and influence things that, like, directly impact our end product. So I worked on an initiative and, like, a project that helped to deliver kind of a more respectful user experience on racial justice related questions. And and just trying to like tap into these kind of local grassroots organizations to see if like there's opportunities for bigger companies to collaborate, like this community engagement, and just to open up opportunities, and I think to knock down some of the barriers that marginalized communities often face when trying to interact with kind of these big global companies. So I've worked a lot on that, kind of brainstorming ideas, badgering people for time to kind of give sometimes just a reality check and work. Like there's been times when I've just said to a senior manager, I need to speak to you because every time we have a meeting, the initial conversation is about rugby and I don't care about rugby. And so I feel like I can never be involved in that initial conversation. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll talk about something else. And like, just sometimes giving people a reality check has helped. So I've been very vocal and active, I think, in trying to push different initiatives.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, such a good point, and kind of reflects on what we were saying earlier around actually you just saying, why am I having to listen to rugby chat all the time at the start of these meetings? Why, you know, that doesn't have to be how it's been, or how things continue to be, how these meetings start, just because that's what you guys are used to. Can we shift that and recognize that there's other people in the room, and there's other conversations that are probably a little bit more pertinent to be having. But I also really like that around, you're talking about like curriculum and educating people about histories. And because there's often this conversation or this idea that like especially around like the impact of the slave trade and colonialism on like Black British people and British people of color, and who, you know, were from ex-colony countries and things like that, and this like lack of understanding or connection to any kind of history. And like I think people really underestimate the importance of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about representation and like what that can really mean to people. But I also really like the point you're making around thinking about your end products and how they're talking to communities and how they're actually impacting communities. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. But thank you. Sorry, Anika, would you like to tell us about any initiatives you're working on, which I'm quite aware of one of them at least? Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. So yeah, the quite short and sharp, but the initiative that I'm working on and I've been working on for the last few months is the Diverse Marketplace. So our Diverse Marketplace is a collection of websites that reaches a diverse audience, set up by our Diversity and Inclusion Council, which is run by a collective of 15 young individuals that are from different ethnicities, races, religions, sexes, loads of different backgrounds, to actually pinpoint where people are actually spending their time online. The marketplace offers a sort of media solution where clients can buy media space for their ads to be shown. So that's in a nutshell. The reason why we decided to set up the sort of diverse marketplace and why it's led us to this conversation today, where we've created the workshop, is very often or not, I get media briefs that do not represent the country that we live in. I don't get a media brief from a client that is trying to target anything that looks like me or anybody else that is of different religion, race, different sexualities, anything that's not the norm. And we really wanted to put together a space, it's not even calling it a safe space, but just a space where people can actually buy into and feel that they're actually targeting these sort of communities and these people. One of the initiatives of thinking was trying to reach a sort of an older Black audience, which would use websites like The Voice, or a gay audience where we would use websites like, I always forget this one, but it's my favorite.
It's Pink News.
Yeah, that was it's a Pink News. I was like, I always forget this one, but it's my favorite. It's one of my favorite reads. And just working into different sort of spaces and different sort of websites and looking to where people are spending their time. Even for older people, there's a great website that actually Lee introduced me to called The Oldie, and we would never know about this. This is targeted to people over 50, and just because we're not at that point in life, like, it's something that is ignored and people are not spoken about. But all these communities exist. It's not just centered around race. It's not just centered around sexuality, religion, sex. It's a load of different things, and we all have to be respectful of not just placing ads on the Daily Mail where half of England will see. And it's just being aware of that, and being aware that sometimes your product will attract different smaller target audiences, and being comfortable to say, I want to spend my money on this diverse marketplace with these smaller websites because this is where my target audience is. So it's just really homing in on that point and recognizing that. And I've sat in countless meetings and briefing sessions and creative sessions where you're asked you get a brief through and you're asked, how do I target this audience? Where do I find them? And asking that question, and you being the only one really that knows what, where and how to target this audience. And then everybody just saying, yeah, let's just bang it all on the Daily Mail. Let's have a cross partnership with them. And you're just thinking, it's great, probably won't reach the audience that we want, but okay, the money's spent. And just making sure that we're invested in these smaller, a lot of them are smaller websites that many people won't know about. One of the examples is Galdem. Really amazing content, and really there for the young Black voice of a woman. Like, there's so much different content and things that we can pull out there, and it would be great to be placing your ad if it was something really tailored to them on this website, and just being open to spending your money, which a lot of the time in working for big clients like I have myself, is not a thought at all for any of these people. So it's really putting it in front of them and telling our clients that this is what we should be doing, and not even convincing them, but having them have that light bulb moment where it switches on and just says, do you know what, we should consider this. This is something that we haven't tried to do before, and it's something that we should be including moving forward. So really proud of the marketplace that we've started, created, and we're still building on. So yeah, that's the main initiative that I've been working on in a few months, to really champion diversity and inclusion.
Oh yeah, and it's such a great initiative, and I think there's a couple of really good points that came out of that, particularly around the idea that, like, just because there might be a small or a niche group doesn't mean that their needs and their wants shouldn't be addressed. And actually, is society not made up of lots of small little groups? So isn't it more important that we're targeting and trying to find ways to reach all those different groups, rather than just going for this blanket idea that in theory might reach, half the people, but are those people really engaged? Are they really going to be loyal? Are they really going to tune in and feel the impact of being recognized, and of being, the fact that their niche interests are, and they're not even that niche. A lot of these groups, Galdem and even like the Oldies and The Voice have quite a broad range of people that they attract, and that they and Pink News, of course, like huge platform. But it's just that I guess like mainstream companies don't necessarily realize and recognize just how big those platforms actually are. Cool. So Chloe,
Yaz, can I jump in for one sec to say also, in terms of business sense, regardless of what your product is, the vaster the more diverse, I guess, the audience that you're reaching, the more people you're reaching, in theory, the more products you're going to be selling. So it makes absolute sense on a business level for, the clients that we're working with, as an example, to be actively looking to diversify those audiences. Otherwise, you've probably got a bit of a shelf life as a product because you're limiting yourself as a business. So yeah, I just thought I'd jump in with that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like we should be, or the companies should be really thinking about, like if you're, you don't continue growing by just sticking with the same pool of people. You have to keep looking for new audiences, and engaging new people in ways that kind of make sense to them. So there should be this natural sense of adaptation that forms the, how these industries work anyway. But it's kind of surprising that a lot of this stuff is still kind of new, and a lot of agencies and companies are still thinking, are still a bit uncertain, are still a little bit like not sure what the steps they need to be taking are. So I think that's also why it's important with the diverse marketplace that you're actually giving them some solid, like, right, you wanted some steps, here you go, start thinking about it in this way, start investing in this way. And at least it's a step one, and hopefully that builds and continues those conversations, and then you start to see some more shifts happening in terms of how they're approaching these different groups and being more relatable to them. Chloe, you mentioned earlier on something about sector responsibility, and we've touched on the business case, but I think we've all spoken quite a bit about the moral responsibility here as well, but particularly like across the sector. So I was wondering about maybe like collaborative working, and how important is it, or what can be done towards creating that sector-wide change that's so important, like when you shift the attitudes of like industries as a whole. How can companies work together? What are the opportunities for collaboration? And should we start with...
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, go for it, Chloe. Chloe.
Yeah, sorry. I thought it was directed at me anyway, but it kind of reminded me of the point that Tom just made. For me, I think that okay, let me backtrack. I've never been in a room where I've highlighted kind of where a product is missing something, and the person responsible for that product saying, oh, we don't care about those communities, or we don't care about that person. So I think that kind of starting from a space where you assume the best, right? You assume that they want to tap into these spaces, that perhaps it's been an oversight, or like it's in a lot of cases, like just a lack of understanding. And I think one of the ways how we can think about moving forward into like a collaborative environment is to start engaging more with communities, like on the ground level. Now I know it's easy to say that, and like from a company audit point of view, it's like, well, what do you mean? Do you mean like setting up kind of focal groups where you get other opinions? And I don't actually think that. I think that within communities, it is so often overlooked how much like there are organizations that do so much for the communities that they are a part of already, and the experience that they have is worth so much. And I think that it's not just a case of, sending out t-shirts or free phones or free products to these like underrepresented communities. It's actually like stepping into the spaces where they exist and really understanding how they interact with product, how they interact with each other, what are like the nuances of how these kind of smaller communities work, and then really trying to lean on the people who've already done the groundwork here and already have the experience, like bring them in as consultants to help like better your product. I don't think it's just a case of, if we're missing people from the LGBTQ community, to hire a few gay people on your team and all of a sudden we're going to be able to better represent that community in our products. It doesn't work like that. It's like active engagement with, I think, organizations that already have this experience and already do the work, and it's kind of catch-22, isn't it? Because it's like the bigger kind of more financially stable companies that want that information, have the money and have the resource to kind of access it, but quite often, I think, don't provide the right bargaining tools or the right resources to these communities to like extract that information. I think that like one of the things in the company I'm in now that I've really pushed is this kind of long-term collaboration. There's been like I at the very beginning I spoke about me wanting to, you know, drive more accessibility in computer science. To me, it doesn't actually mean going into a school and doing a workshop once a year and, you know, really inspiring people on this one day and then leaving and them not knowing how could I possibly get there? What's the roadmap? Like, I don't like inspiration helps a lot, but I think that, you know, almost less is more, in the sense that if you did less work over a longer period of time, I think it would be more impactful than a large campaign at like a very kind of trending point in time. And I think that in general, communities and organizations and like charities that do a lot of really hard work, there's resilience for them to just like jump onto these, like collaborate with these corporate companies, because there's not much trust there. And I think that that's something that companies need to do, right? They need to work on fostering trust with these kind of smaller organizations, perhaps, or like smaller charities, so that there can be this kind of long, mutually beneficial collaboration. Yeah, they're my thoughts. Sorry if I'm ranting a little bit.
I mean, you have answered like 5 of my questions, but it's so good, and you framed it in such a like well thought out way. And you've touched upon so many like excellent points, but I really like the point around that follow through, and that it's not good. Like, yeah, it's good enough to, inspiration is great, but actually you still need to continue that work, continue building and nurturing those relationships and creating genuine long lasting relationships, because this work needs to be ongoing. As we said, like even if it's small steps, those steps are important if they are consistent and continuous. And so, yeah, we definitely can't overlook them. We can't devalue them, and devalue like that it will take time to build these relationships. There's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of mistrust, and a lot of it is very like justifiably so. Kind of following on from that, I want to ask and continue this conversation around how to build these authentic connections, and how can we steer away from like performative action and away from like, you know, the black squares that do kind of nothing at the end of the day. Anika, do you want to have any thoughts around how to build authentic connections?
Yeah. So initially it starts internally. So people can instantly see if a brand is not authentic in what they're doing. If they're just posting a black square because it's the time to do it, if they're literally just hired a token somebody just to be on their team, just to represent, tick the diversity box. People see right through it. And there's one thing that I love to death about the generation just below me, is that they call it out more than we or my parents would like know about. And that is what we need. So now organizations have to internally say, how do we actually authentically do this? And it's okay for them to say, I don't know how to do this. I need some help. Can somebody help us? Bring in somebody to do this, and start these initiatives with internally in their organizations. Before you can start executing this as an external thing, you need to do it internally. You need to be the champion of bringing in as much diverse people on your team in order to have this, the end product to be diverse and inclusive, and people will see that automatically. You don't need to put on these big shows of saying this is what we do and we're here for this and we stand for this. You don't need to do that without attacking it internally first. And once you do that, the message will trickle down, and it will be something that actually just happens. Chloe, you've got your hand up. You want to add on to this? Oh.
No, I'm clapping. I'm clapping.
Oh,
It was a reaction. You were
yes.
saying that, and I was feeling it. I was like, yes, what you're saying.
It just has to be. That's the only way to be authentic. Like, everyone can fake it till they make it, but somebody is going to see through it. So until you do it internally first, and making sure that your organization reflects what you are trying to portray, that's the only way to do this. It's the only way. Well, for me anyway, that it just seems like the only way. And like I said, the fact that people are calling out more and more now makes this an even harder job. And so you should be literally sitting on people's necks and just saying, well, this isn't right. What are you going to do about it? How do you tackle this? And people should be comfortable now just saying, I don't know. Teach me. I need help. How do I do this? What do I say? How do I address this? Nobody is right in anything. Nobody knows everything about everything. There's parts of diversity and inclusion that I don't know about certain terms of how to address people, certain communities. I don't know everything about diversity and inclusion. I only know my own personal experience, and talking with other people and talking with different communities and getting that understanding and the will to learn can only help us move forward with that. But for me, as I said, it's an internal thing first for it to be then to be an external thing.
Yes, 100%. Because like with those black squares, for example, like, you know, people had these knee-jerk reactions of like, oh, we've got to do something. We've got to be seen to be doing something. And it's like, well, people don't care about that. What they want to see is the actual work being done. And yeah, so that internal focus and that internal like shifting of like, some people are going to have to give up some power. Unfortunately, that's what happens. If you really want to see this change, you have to understand that it absolutely has to start internally, and you have to start seeing different people in like decision-making places and positions, and you have to really think about like who is contributing to the conversation and who has the power to like actually determine what happens, determine what the output is and what comes next. And so, yeah, you have to just, this like that diversity of thought that was mentioned earlier, bringing in different perspectives, which will relate to different backgrounds and different experiences, but doing it in a really conscious way where you are aware of who isn't present and that you like why you're doing that work. Why do you need these voices, these different voices?
Just an example of of how to attack that internally. I am currently part of a program at work where we have a reverse mentorship. So I'm actually speaking with people like levels above me, the CEO, those sort of titles, and they're asking me questions about how I feel about the agency and the way that it's run, and a lot of internal questions and these conversations that need to be had. And we're at a point of this mentorship now that it feels very unbiased, which is great that I can literally have this voice and said, well, you said something in a meeting that I didn't agree with, and I know you're the CEO, and I'm telling you that that doesn't sit right with me or anybody that was on my team, and the way that you address stuff, and they're actually listening. And it's so refreshing to be a part of something like that, that you actually do feel like your voice is heard. We're at the start of it, so we will see if there's action in the end, but this initial conversation is nothing like I've experienced before. So that's just one way of how it's great to sort of start that sort of change within an organization.
Definitely. Yes, thank you. It's like, thank you. And thank you all actually for the more you talk, you are explaining like the initiatives that are happening. I think it's really important because it's giving other people ideas about things of like actual action that they can start taking and initiatives that they can start embedding in their working environments as well. And you know, we're starting to see, like we said, it's early days for a lot of these things, but actually we're already starting to see some of the impact that's having. And even whether that is just on you as an individual, being able to say, or like the young people or other people like we're talking about, being able to say, no, that's not good enough, do better, pushing people to go further. Like that's already a change that, you know, might not have happened. We might not have seen in the same way like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Tom, obviously in the work that you do, you spoke about trying to reach different audiences and audiences who might not previously felt that like theatre was a space that was open to them. So how are you working towards, or what do you think about working towards building genuine connections and authentic connections with those audiences?
It's such a huge question. So that's certainly not me going, I don't know how to answer it. But, you know, there are certain questions that I maybe don't know how to answer, and how best we can do those things. All we can do, and what we're doing right now as a business, is having conversation. And, you know, as I said, we're maybe not the most representative agency in terms of diversity. So those conversations perhaps are a little bit one-sided. And so perhaps it's as part of, I'd say, the volunteer group, and this is definitely not something that we've taken to leadership and gone, you've got to make this happen right now, and they've agreed to do it. That hasn't necessarily happened yet. It's all a work in progress, as I said. But we're very, very well positioned as an agency with the work that we do. We're a full service agency as well, so we do everything from creative through to media, and everything in between that. We have incredible relationships with producers across the West End and regionally, nationally too, because sometimes we get stuck a little bit in a London bubble. I know I'm a bit guilty of that sometimes, so I don't want to forget that. We've got, you know, incredible relationships, and, you know, one of the big questions that we as a volunteer team have been kind of mulling over is, how do we use that power to our advantage? And is it a kind of, not an outreach program, but an initiative that we could launch across the industry, perhaps, that would mean you could have people from all sorts of backgrounds, from all over the country, coming and understanding what it's like to work within this industry, whether it be on the marketing side, whether it's backstage, whether it's wigs, costume, anything, lighting, so many different roles. Is there a kind of an induction program that we could do, which again makes the industry feel more accessible? So I think we're really, really well positioned to do that. As I say, this isn't something that's necessarily going to happen, but it's certainly something that we're talking about and that we're taking to leadership and going, we're in an amazing, unique position, and that's where I'd say we're at. As I say, we're probably slightly behind other industries because we've not really been functioning fully as a business for the last year. But again, it's no excuse, and I'm very much a like if not now when kind of person as well. So it's finding the right balance and getting your voice heard, I guess, in the right way too. I'd say internally. If that answers it. Again, it's probably a bit of a cop out, that, isn't it?
No, I don't think so at all. I think you've raised some really important questions, and kind of it's like I said, we're a lot of across sectors and across industries and across organizations, people are coming from the similar starting point of like, okay, for the first time, we're actually recognizing that there's a problem. We're recognizing we need to do something about it, and we don't necessarily have all the answers immediately, but like we need to do something. And also starting to recognize the power that you do have, the position where you actually are at. And then I think the next step is then, okay, what do we do with that power? How can we start to build these initiatives? How can we start to build these relationships? And like we said, that will take time.
I think it's interesting as well what Anika was saying about it starting internally. Because as I say, you know, we're in a very different position that we were, 12 months ago. Let's say that as an agency, we've had to, significantly reduce the size, the volume of staff, etc. But within that, more recently, roles have opened up. So the way that we're recruiting has changed. We're working with Hidden, a company, which almost anonymizes the recruitment process. Your name is taken out, your education background. It's all about your work experience. It's not, and we're using that, as a first step in bettering our recruitment process. But it's something that we're doing, that we're hoping to see that there is that kind of change to the makeup of the agency as a result of that. and again, it's all progress, I think, and it will be interesting to see how well it works and whether we are able to diversify our kind of workforce that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I think it's quite important just to find and look out for the opportunities that present themselves as well. Because as you said, like obviously this whole period has been a minefield for everybody, and nobody really, especially right at the beginning, didn't know what was happening, how they were going to get through, and were prioritizing things differently. And what's quite interesting for me from my like business and how I work is that initially when COVID started and lockdown started happening, everybody was like, D&I, sorry, so that's got to go, can't afford it, that's expendable. And then obviously after, the conversations around police brutality and racial injustice and everything started happening, everybody was like, oh, actually, we really cannot just like shove that under the rug and get rid of it. And so it's unfortunate that that's what it's taken to revive these conversations. But I think it revived it with such urgency and with such a sense of like, we are never going to go back to a point before where actually you could just think of D&I as something that was expendable and something that we didn't have to recognize. Like now it is almost integral to any business, and like anybody who isn't taking D&I seriously, I think a lot of people will approach them and be kind of like, well, what are you doing? How are you functioning? And so it is really that shift, like that industry-wide shift as well, and that's happening. So I'm conscious of time, and I do have a few more questions kind of around like industry initiatives and things like that. But actually, I wanted to get to know you all a little bit more as well, and what your personal career paths have been, and what advice you might have for other people trying to get into them, whether that's young people coming out of school, university, or people who are just coming from different backgrounds and with different experiences. And so, yeah, there's two questions there. Is what was your route? How did you get into the role you were in? And I know we've touched on it a little bit, and especially about navigating the different ways through it. But so yeah, like what was that? Could we expand on that a bit more? And then what tips do you have for people wanting to get into the industry now? Let's start with Chloe.
Yeah, sure. So in reflection, I think I've overcome significant hurdles that could have hindered me getting to where I am now, because I've spent a lot of time in academia in my life. And when I think about in high school, I selected my options in year 9 to do for my GCSEs, and my predicted grades for like my GCSEs limited my opportunities. My predicted grades for my A levels meant that regardless of the grades that I actually got, what my teachers predicted me meant that I couldn't apply to Oxford and Cambridge, which I probably wouldn't have anyway. But the point is, I was limited in my university choices because my teachers underestimated me. Then when I actually got my results and I kind of exceeded expectations, I was still in this position where, well, what do I do? Do I try and go through clearing now at one of these, more prestigious universities, but doing a course that I didn't want to do? And, thankfully, it didn't end up impacting where I ended up and where I work now. But so early on in my life, that could have been a barrier that quite literally would have shifted and changed my entire future. There is absolutely no way I would have got to where I am now if for instance, there was a point where I was like, oh, I'm not going to go to uni at all, because it was like I felt embarrassed by the universities that I could apply for, because my teachers like thought that I was only going to get C's, and compared to all my friends who are applying to UCL and King's, and then I got the grades to get into those schools, but I'm applying at like unis, which you kind of say a little bit quieter because people don't respect those universities as much. And I think that's shaped a lot of how I think about things now. In my undergrad, I did math. Being a woman doing math, there was like, I know I could count on one hand the number of women in our maths class at undergrad. When I went on to do my PhD, there were instances where I was doing like teaching assistant work and doing some lecturing, and I would, walk into the lecture hall and students would be like, oh, you're the tutor, you're the lecturer. And there was like no trust. There was no trust that I could deliver this content just from a snapshot look at myself. Like, I'm sure that kind of didn't help. Maybe I looked young, but I wasn't what the students imagined a teaching assistant or a lecturer to look like. And so they didn't have much faith then in the content that I was delivering. And it took a long time it took weeks of, just consistently ignoring these awkward moments to build up that trust and build up confidence as well. Then when I think about stepping into industry out of academia, which, when you go to these international conferences and these like research groups, women at this level working in, electrical engineering schools, which is what the kind of broader school that my PhD research fell into, very few people there. It was in 2019, I went to like one of the biggest global speech conferences. It was based in Vienna. There was like thousands of people there, and there were 4 Black people there. Thousands of researchers from the field that I work in, 4 Black people. There was 1 other Black woman there. So like, I think sometimes we say, oh yeah, diversity and inclusion and like representation matters, but it's like, it takes a lot for an individual to, be resilient when you are faced time and time again with these spaces where you cannot fit in. And some people might think, or like will say, well, you don't want to fit in. Standing out is a great thing. But this is a true story that I'd like to share, actually. At this international conference that I went to, I found it really intimidating, quite draining. And I had feedback from a manager afterwards talking about how, oh, I didn't see you in any of the work groups that I was present in. Bearing in mind, this conference, as I said, had like thousands of people, multiple rooms and sessions happening at the same time. And so it's not strange or unlikely that we wouldn't be in the same kind of session at the same time. And I kind of made a comment back about, yes, it is kind of noticeable to you that you didn't see me in any of those rooms. And that's because you've only got to take a 1-second glance in that room, and you will spot me out of a crowd of hundreds of people. And I was like, how many rooms were you in with my colleague, Paul? And he was like, oh, well, I don't know. And I was like, exactly, because Paul blended in those environments. And, just having the luxury of being able to, navigate a conference and not stick out like a sore thumb in every room I have. Like if I stick my hand up, people are almost expecting me to bring up, oh, what are the ethical implications of this? How have you considered underrepresented? Like, I don't want to be that person in these spaces who only focus on the underrepresented and like the minority groups, which is the expectation. And there's pressure that comes with that. There's so few Black people, there's so few women in the industry that I work in that I feel pressure. Like, I can't mess this up for everyone. I have to be exceptional all of the time. I think I've just gone off on a bit of a rant again now. I forgot even what I was doing, but I was talking about like my career, how I got to where I am. And so to summarize, I was in academia a lot, segued into industry through an internship, and it's like almost a miracle. I think it's almost a miracle that I still work in a corporate environment and that I'm still here now, because it is hard.
Oh, yeah, that journey and that what you said, like people are like, oh, it's great to stand out, it's great to be, surely that's means that you have more opportunities because you're the only one who's like you. But they don't see the pressure, and they don't see that like you're like not even just the pressure on your shoulders externally, but like just constantly being the only person of whatever, and like not seeing anybody else, not having a support network who fully understands the experience, how draining that can be. So I'm going to ask the other two as well, but after this, we're going to have a little bit of time for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please start putting them in the chat so we can start thinking about them. But yeah, I'm going to pass over now to Tom. So what was your route into your industry, and do you have any tips for anybody else, particularly from marginalized backgrounds, wanting to enter your field as well?
The first thing I want to say is thank you, Chloe, for sharing all of that. That was so enlightening it was just candid and it's honest, and I love that, and it's unfiltered, and you're giving your real experience of what your career has actually been like. So thank you firstly for that. I now feel a little bit sort of white and male and privileged in terms of kind of my path in comparison potentially. So I was definitely not an academic kind. I think Chloe and I maybe differ in that sense. I had the brains at school and I just didn't really apply myself. I thought, no, I'm going to be a performer whenever in my life. I'm going to be a pop star. I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to be in Corrie, like one of those things. And that was kind of my mission in life. And I was very, very fortunate that I was accepted to go to drama school as kind of my university experience. And 4 months before I graduated, I thought, I don't like this anymore at the age of 21. So I thought, okay, well, I'll move back home for a bit and kind of figure out what I'm supposed to do from here. And I'm from Wigan originally in the Northwest. I don't think my accent probably tells you that, but it's true. I was still 21, so I moved home for about 6 months and tried to figure it out. And my mum essentially pushed me out of the nest again and sent me on my way to London. I moved down here. I worked in a call centre very briefly. I then got my first full-time job in print sales, which was for a very niche publication. I was there for I wasn't there for very long, but it was, it was a great learning experience. And that's, I would say in my early career, that's absolutely the most kind of representative place that I had, or diverse place that I'd worked. I then hopped over to doing some events, which was probably the most, let's just call it, suburban place I've ever worked. And yeah, I don't think there was much diversity there whatsoever. Yeah, I think I was the most diverse person there, and I'm a white male. I am gay, openly gay, but I'm a white male, and that's as diverse as it was. I then moved into digital ad sales. I was there for about 1.5 years, and that was, ironically, given how little I applied myself in school, I was working for a digital business that specialized within the education sector. So that was great and taught me as much as I kind of needed to get. And then that just told me, you've got to go and work at an agency. I was working with media agencies and selling to them, and thought, no, I want to be doing what they're doing, because to me it just seemed so glamorous, and they always seemed to be out for like long lunches on Fridays and all of these fabulous things. So I was very, very lucky in that I was offered a role at Mediacom, which is the largest agency in the UK. That was amazing, absolutely amazing. It was hard work, very long hours, but I loved it. I was there for about 2.5 years, and there was a bit of a restructure within the agency, and I thought, I don't like this. What they're doing over there at De Winters, that I like my theatre, I love all of that sort of stuff, and it felt like it was kind of marrying together my interests from when I was younger with, I guess, my professional qualifications, if you like, or credentials. I don't really have many qualifications, so if I were to give advice to I guess almost my younger self, because I don't know how, my advice is not going to be universal, and it's not going to apply to everybody else, because we don't live in an equal world. But if I were to give advice to my younger self, it would be just believe in yourself and just keep going, because I've definitely done jobs that I didn't enjoy, but I've kind of found where I belong in a way, within at least a media agency. If that covers everything. Yes, I don't know.
No, it does. Sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on the chat as well. It really does. Quick question: is it as glamorous as you thought it was going to be with the long legs?
No way, absolutely not. You know, they say perceptions are reality. Perceptions are often quite deceiving, I think.
Fair. And Anika, what was your route and any tips?
Yeah, so I'm going to be quite candid here. I literally went to uni, once again, a bit like Chloe, was predicted ridiculously low grades, wasn't accepted at my chosen universities. And then when I got my grades back, they were like, hey, come here. And I was like, nah, forget it. You didn't want me at the start. So, you know, I'll go to my second choice. Ended up going to my second choice, loved it. It was more of a social time at university for me, because I realized that the course that I was on, it had all the basis that I had of everything that I'd learned from like my A levels and my high school education, but it was missing something, and I didn't know what it was, because the route that the place that I'm in today, my university education actually didn't contribute much to it. So one of my tips, when you'll see where when I take you through my route would be not thinking that university is the be all and end all. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I progressed, and my first job in the industry was working literally buying television. Now that sounds crazy for anybody that's not in the media agency. I literally was the assistant. I was a broadcast assistant for one of the biggest media agency networks, Dentsu Aegis, and I was literally punching in numbers, doing reports, doing all that groundwork, and I just thought, like, this is actually something what I want to do. What's happening over there? Like, I'm buying TV at the moment, but how do you buy print? How do you buy print? Or how do you buy outdoor? Or all these different things started buzzing in my head, and I literally was in my role as a broadcast assistant, got it down, was doing spot times and punching in numbers and ACCA, if anybody knows about television, of how hard it is to actually buy television media and actually learn it. Doing that for about 1.5 years. Then I moved to my second big agency, MediaCom, which really gave me a basis of all the other medias that I'd never had exposure to before. But coming into the industry and learning TV as one of the hardest medias to first have any sort of experience with was a great stepping stone for me. And then going to MediaCom really gave me a basis to really say, okay, then that's fine. I've brought TV now. I'm going to buy print. I'm going to buy outdoor. I'm going to buy digital. Was there for about 2 years, had an amazing plethora of experience. The people that I worked with, some amazing people, actually long-term friends now. And just the experience of working in a regional office in Birmingham, having that sort of buzz and being in a bigger city. I'm from a small city, from Wolverhampton in the Midlands. So being in a bigger city and having that whole experience, like you said, that whole late lunches and drinking in the afternoon, I thought, this is definitely up my street. But I realized what I want to do is be with clients. I love speaking to people. I love entertaining, that sort of thing. And being within the media agency and this space enabled me to do that. But at MediaCom, I only got a taste. And I realised that I wasn't getting any further after being there for 2.5 years. So what do I need to do? I need to take this to another level. So I decided to give myself the promotion and move to London. Apply for an account manager role. I got it. Was in an independent agency. My first one for over a year. Auto Media really gave me that real client experience. I was in front of them. I was explaining to them what their campaigns mean, how to target people, how to put this all together in most layman terms, and just giving my energy, which they needed, which you need as an account manager, because literally you have days where you want to throw your client through the window because they ask you for the most ridiculous requests, and it's my job to advise you, but advise you with a smile and not want to literally just go, no, we can't do that. So fuck off. was at All10 Media for about a year and a half. I've moved around a lot, as you can tell. Went to a brand called Cairo TV, really young and happening Gen Z brand agency. Less of an agency and more of a brand, where I was working on their social media and really just doing anything, all their paid media for them, and just advising them of how to really like make their campaigns work for them, reach the people that they want to reach, and just advising them on how to do that. Was there for a few months and realised that I've got something here. I keep on telling people what to do and how they should buy stuff. Why don't I set up my own agency or do some freelancing? And I ended up doing freelancing within the last 6 months, just due to the pandemic. I've lost my job and things like that. And it's been the best thing ever. It's where I've been able to extend my career and work with Yaz and Lee at Silence. And my last role at the moment, well, my day-to-day job, as mentioned, was working as a digital investment manager at Spark Foundry. And I've literally only got here because I've decided to leave an agency, not because I hated the agency or I hate the people. It was just my time to go. And it was my time to give myself a promotion and learn different things. And I've done it. So the only advice I would say to people is, don't stay somewhere just because it feels comfortable, it feels safe, and this is what you're meant to do. If you feel like you deserve more, give yourself that more. And that's it, really. Like, university isn't the be-all and end-all. I went to uni and I studied marketing, advertising and PR, and it had nothing to do with the route that I'm in today. But the glamour of working and speaking with people, I'm a people person, and just having that conversation and that dialogue really allowed me to get where I am today. So yeah, university is not the be-all and end-all, and give yourself the promotion that you deserve. Leave. But within reason, but yeah.
I really hope we're all if we take one thing away from today, it's give yourself the promotion. It's amazing. And definitely something I feel like I left my very kind of comfortable job in the middle of a pandemic and started my own company, and it's going very well, but like, yeah, it was a move. But yeah, like I couldn't have predicted just how quickly things have grown and developed. But it was just about having that push to say, like, I'm gonna just go for it. And like, you know, I was kind of lucky to be able to do that in many ways, but also I definitely, there was a shift in my mindset, which was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And actually, I don't think I can afford to fail. So I'm going to just do everything necessary to make sure this works. Thank you all. This has been incredible. We've got just a couple questions from the panel that I want to, hopefully we'll have a few minutes to answer. The first one is around, so they've set up a EDI forum within a media agency, and they're looking to increase participation from people from different backgrounds, while being conscious of not asking for too much additional work or emotional labor. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? I can read the rest of the context as well if it helps, but it's in the chat also.
I was having to think about this because I'd read it, so if you don't mind if I jump in, but I think that for the communities that you're trying to reach, it is really obvious when things are kind of like authentically done. I think really trying to, you know, collaborate with talent from those communities in a way that gives them like creative freedom to, you know, produce something that will resonate with that specific group. There's been many a times when I've watched like TV or read something or seen like an advert, right? And I'm like, who signed this off? You know, I've seen adverts on like female products and I'm like, I know this is done by a man. I just know it. When things are kind of created by the community for the community, it resonates. And so I think there's a great opportunity for media companies and just like larger corporate companies in general to have a kind of open collaboration with creators who already know how to best serve those communities. But I say that with the kind of asterisks of, they also need to have like the creative freedom. It's not pulling somebody out of this space for them to just kind of execute something that has been thought about in a boardroom. It's them to like really understand the problem and then go away and create content or create a product that they know that like that has an influence of their kind of knowing of the community and understanding of the community. I think that's really important.
Thank you. I hope that answered the question a bit. Do Tom or Anika, if you have any thoughts, feel free to jump in as well.
I was going to jump in, and I could be misinterpreting it just because it's in writing and I've been chatting away and stuff. But I was wondering if there was a reason that you had subgroups to the initiative. As I understand it, it sort of says that particularly the group on races have very low signups. I wonder if there's kind of a conversation that can be had that's across everybody who's volunteered, regardless of the subgroup, just bring everybody together and perhaps have that conversation with everybody in the room, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, so Catherine's responding to say, Catherine, you can also come on mic. We've got a few minutes left if you want to explain further. But,
yeah, sure. Sorry. So yeah, that's a really good point. I think we decided to go with subgroups because we thought that it would be a way for people within these different communities to understand that they're here to be represented as well, and that maybe it would kind of focus conversation. So for example, we've got like a really thriving LGBTQ plus group, and they're kind of organising events and things like that. So the idea was to focus specific topics, but definitely they're conscious of the fact that that might not have been the right way to go in terms of making people feel that they have to join this specific group, or because they're within that group, it's their job to have those conversations. I think that's another conversation we can have as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, this is definitely a moment for finding solidarity and thinking about collaboration. So if you've got a group that's doing things quite well, what learning can you take from them? How can you do, like, if they're doing events and things, how can you, even if it's just a couple people, work with that group to make it a more inclusive event in terms of like reaching different like identity groups, and looking for opportunities there as well, like we're saying, to work together instead of because if there is importance and there's relevance in having specific space for specific experiences. But I think at the same time, like, there's definitely a lot to be said, and it seems like in this situation, around building that collaboration and working together as well.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Could I add a point as well? Sometimes it's about the kind of branding of these initiatives. I know one of the things that we noticed is when we would have like conversations, if it was called about like, let's talk about race, or, an honest conversation about racism, we would have a lot of participants who were Black or people of colour join. Not so many kind of white people felt comfortable to enter a space which was kind of branded, let's talk about race. Whereas like, you can have that same conversation and you call it like allyship, how to better practice allyship, and you find you have like, it kind of almost opens up to people who would feel just slightly uncomfortable. And I think, sometimes just branding these initiatives, like having meet someone who you don't know, that could, the conversation could be like tailored to anything in a situation like that. But there's not this kind of initial anxiety of, what if I say the wrong thing, or I wouldn't want to take up space where I'm not welcome. I think it's really important about getting that branding right, so everyone starts either like hearing or participating in these conversations.
Yeah, thank you. And like a great way to wrap this up, I think, when we're talking about branding and how we're thinking about the messaging that we're putting out and what that's saying to different audiences. Okay. Any final questions, really quick, literally like a minute left of final questions? Okay. In that case, I really, really, really want to thank our whole panel. You've all been incredible. There's been so many like insightful points. Learning from your own personal experiences, but then also talking about some of the initiatives that you're running, and then just like understanding your perspectives on certain things. It's just been so useful and so inspiring and motivational. And I hope we've all like can take like so much away from this today. And if nothing else, give yourself a promotion. Yeah, so thank you, participants, everybody, for joining as well. Please, could we all put our either social medias as the best ways to interact or contact your with your work? Could you put that in the chat? Panelists, sorry, not necessarily just everybody, but yeah, if you can put your information in the chat, and it'd be really great if we could follow what you're doing and just learn a bit more about you and your work. And good luck with everything, and thank